Okay, great, thanks. So I was just explaining, so this, I don't know if there's any public joining us, have the link to see, but what we want to do, this is just a regular update, right? That where you're going to tell us where we are with the transportation sales tax plan, and I'm not going to do any informal here, although it sounds like I am, because we just want this to be a conversation, just like we would do, and not make it a formal presentation that would inhibit conversation. So you're going to make your presentation. We have your memo. We want to have the same kind of conversation we would have around this table.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to join, and I could introduce our team that's here today. I'm Kathleen Brackey. I'm the Deputy Director for Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting and lead our transportation planning team. And with us today is Dale Case, our Community Planning and Permitting Director. Also Rachel Gadecki from Boulder County Public Works. Also Christine Obendorf, our Interim Director for Public Works. And then online we have Stacy Proctor, who is a project manager with our transportation planning team. So we're very excited to be here today and have a chance to have this conversation. We have a few slides that we'd like to share with you, and Stacy, thanks for running those for us. If you could advance to the next slide, please. This is what we're hoping to cover today. Just a brief overview of Boulder County's transportation sales tax, and including the extension of the sales tax that was approved by the voters last year. The high-level review of the current and proposed projects, and then really opening it up for a conversation and discussion among all of you. So that's okay. We'll jump right in and cover these topics quickly. We kind of have a tag team presentation for you, but I'll just kick us off as just a reminder. The Boulder County transportation sales tax is a 0.1% sales tax. It started over 20 years ago. And last fall, it was approved by the voters to be extended in perpetuity. So we are very, very thankful for all of the support across Boulder County from all of the community members, the stakeholders, everyone who helped work on the transportation sales tax extension and have that be successful and moving forward. It really is the foundational funding or bread and butter funding for our transportation system improvements. And these are examples of the project categories that these funds are used for to create multimodal transportation safety and resilience projects, our regional corridors, transit services and programs, as well as our regional trails and bikeways, and then our transportation mobility programs that are really designed to support human-centered transportation, particularly for vulnerable populations, older adults, people with disabilities, low income, and youth and families. So we'll cover some of the highlights in our presentation today, but this gives you kind of a backdrop to the work that we're doing and wanting to be prudent in the investment of these important dollars for Boulder County's transportation system. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I'll hand it off to Rachel.
Thank you. These are a list of some of the projects that we've accomplished over the past years. Technically, we can go down each one, but for instance, the Shoulders project, that's an example, and you can kind of see it over there, the image on the right that shows the project. And this one specifically, that image is from Lee Hill and Old Stage. It was the widening of that corridor, and to include the Shoulders. As Kathleen said, we had several different tiers involved in this one category. So intersections is another one. Recently, we accomplished the intersections of 281 and Isabel as an example. 287, I apologize. Transit services, miles, 23 miles of regional trails, including that one would include the connector between IBM and the Logo Trail as an example of that. 3 bridges and 6 pedestrian underpasses as shown in the lowermost image. And that one is at Airport Road and Hover, right before you get to Hover.
Hover and 119 yesterday. I said Airport Road.
Oh, it is. I thought it was diagonal, but you said airport, so I was going to say it's airport then. that area. Yes. Next slide, please.
So, again, we're just kind of tag teaming back and forth, but this is some of the information that's provided on Boulder County's transportation sales tax website that shows, again, these project categories and some of these examples, and just really, I think, helps illustrate, while all of these different projects serve different needs, they really all work together to provide a network of mobility across Boulder County and help people who are traveling by all modes of transportation and to all different areas of the county. So that's the idea, is that while we talk about these categories of projects, the idea is they all fit together and support one another and support people traveling across the county. We can go to the next slide. I'd also like to introduce Angel Bond from our project, from Transportation Planning, who's joined us online as well. Sorry, I missed her at the beginning, but she's online too. And then this is additional information that, again, is on Boulder County's transportation sales tax website. It provides, again, kind of looking at the funding picture for the transportation sales tax. We forecast that it generates approximately $9 million per year. And then we use this approach to share that funding across all of the different project categories. So, for example, 55% for roadway safety and resilience, and we have 5% for mobility, 10% regional corridors, and so on. But the idea, again, is that all of those pieces of the pie add up to provide options for people. On the left, the example of the spreadsheet there includes a list of projects. Again, it's on our website, and it was identified for the first 15 years of the transportation sales tax. So recognizing that this does go on in perpetuity, it was important, as we were talking to the community last year, to have a list of how are we going to get started and where will the initial funding go toward. And so as part of that information, you'll see that it includes not only the total cost of the project, but how much of the funding is anticipated to come from the Boulder County transportation sales tax, and thereby helping to show how much money do we need to find from additional sources. So recognizing some of these projects are large in scale, and none of our agencies can fund them alone. We need to find ways to fund them together and go after grants. So it's a good illustration of how those pieces add up. And that information, again, is available on the website. Next slide, please. So, and this is a map of those projects that were on the list. And again, recognizing we'll put all this information is on our website along with the interactive map. But the main point here is looking at the breadth of the types of projects that are identified across Boulder County, all different types of projects, all of the different communities. And again, the idea of providing mobility options and choices for people who live and work and travel across Boulder County. We'll go to the next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it back to Rachel.
Sure. Again, this is a summary of the list of categorized specifically. So, you know, we have the ballot list of projects. This is just categorized by type of project, not necessarily by segment or roadway. And all of these projects did originate from our transportation master plan and buy-in from everybody. So that's just a small grouping and list of projects that we are planning to accomplish with the newly passed transportation sales.
And just to keep us moving along, sorry, because we went through the campaign. Commissioner Stolzman was mayor and was very familiar with it, so we've got a lot of background.
Oh, I was going to ask if we're asking questions now.
Yes.
Or if we're waiting. And my question, just for a reminder for me, yes, I'm familiar with it. Yes, I worked on the Lindsay campaign as well. The transportation master plan that's guiding this 2024-2039 project list. When was that?
Same then. Was adopted in 2020.
Okay.
In February 2020.
And the tax, it looked like, was renewed 2007 to 23, and then back on. What I'm trying to figure out as we move through this conversation is what's like shovel ready, what may not have been informed by the current strategic priorities and or the current focus in Boulder County over the last several years of policy 1.6 in regards to how do we respond to race and racial equity in transportation networks. So that's where I'm headed, but as we move through the conversation.
And I just want to add in, because it was a sales tax, I think there was some collaboration from the locals. A lot of times, counties are seen more as like property tax users, and the local jurisdictions typically have used sales taxes. And so I think there was some negotiation around the project list that's not straight from the transportation master plan. It has some collaboration and buy-off from the various communities that kind of goes beyond that a bit.
I would agree, but, but some of those negotiations still help build up
For sure.
on our transportation master.
For sure. All the communities are working on values and systematic things that are supportive of our plan. I just think some of the projects
Yes.
didn't really come from our transportation master plan. Either.
And that transparency. is what-
Yeah.
Next slide, Stacy.
Oh, so sorry about that. We're alternating, so I was taking down some notes. One of the other things that we did last year as part of developing the transportation sales tax list of projects was look at our transportation master plan, the TMP, and identify not only the mobility benefits that come from that list of projects, but what are the other, what I would call co-benefits, the emission reduction analysis from those projects. So there's, again, a more detailed report online, but it was a way to look at what are the types of projects that are generating emission reduction, and how do they add up together? How are we looking at the impact or return on investment for, say, regional trails and bikeway projects, for example? But this was very important information for us so that we have that background, that context about how the projects for transportation help contribute to Boulder County's broader sustainability goals. And let's go ahead to the next slide, Stacy, and we'll go through these quickly. Like you said, you have a lot of the background. And I will say for others that are watching as well, this is a similar presentation that we provided to the consortium of cities last month as well, and to other groups. So we wanted to share this information. It's what we would call our grant success over the last year and a half, because as I mentioned, when you look at the list of projects from the transportation sales tax, it showed the total cost of the projects and then the portion identified from Boulder County. So it's really important that we're able to leverage that Boulder County portion through grant opportunities, regional, state, and federal, so that we can complete the projects and programs and services identified on the list. So over the past year and a half, we've been very successful in that through a combination of dollars from the sales tax of about 2.7 million. We've been able to secure almost $72 million worth of grant funding, again, for a whole array of different types of projects, programs, and services. But all that together adds up to almost $76 million worth of transportation system investment. And then on top of that, we got the good news a couple of weeks ago about the federal raise grant for Colorado 119. So that is big news to help advance the Colorado 119 corridor. So let's go ahead to the next slide, Stacy. We included the slide. I won't go through it in detail, but it is in this way you have the information as background. But we broke out the list of the Denver Regional Council of Governments Transportation Improvement Program projects. We use a lot of acronyms in transportation. So I tried to say all of those out loud, but it gives, again, an example of all of the different pieces and parts that we go after with the grant funding to help create particularly some of the larger scale corridor projects like Colorado 119, but also our bikeway and our transit improvements. It shows the countywide transit plan that was funded through DRCOG, for example. Also Colorado 119 improvements, Colorado 7, and then funding to continue corridor studies along South Boulder Road, as well as Vision Zero Safe Routes to School plan that we talked about earlier today. So it kind of breaks out that large DRCOG transportation improvement plan number, so you can see what's all inside that. Next slide, please, Stacy.
Are you, for the CDOT portion, are you including all the programs in the RPP, or are you just including the ones that we got other funding on?
These are just projects that we applied for grant funding for, and CDOT was a project funding partner along with.
Okay,
Or
so it's not
TDR.
to be inclusive of the CDOT funding in our section of Region 4.
Well, CDOT uses a variety of sources to
Right.
provide their contribution. So. this
And then
is-
they spent other money than that too, that's not listed, I guess is my question. So this is not to be inclusive of all the transportation funding, just the ones that are associated with TIP project.
That we applied for. So CDOT has a lot more projects across Region
Yeah.
4 beyond what we applied for.
Kathleen, I'm wondering if you put the minimize on the screen in front of you.
Oh.
There
Hopefully
we
that works. Natalie's running this from the other room, so I'm just trying to make sure I don't punch it
And then I'm
in.
gonna ask you one more thing, the X at the top for the recordings of participants.
Oh,
Okay, that's covering.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. Wait, and I'll hand it back to Rachel.
Just kind of providing you updates on the specific projects that are highlighted in yellow.
These are the shovel ready ones, are they?
Many of them. So for instance, the construction, so 71st Street shoulders, that is a road improvement as well as some traffic improvements that were accomplished in partnership with CDOT, as you were mentioning. And the road is open. We're still finishing up the last little bits of construction, but that road is open and operable. The next section, these are projects that we're planning for 24 and 25 for either one of those years, depending on our personnel. And so 120th Street shoulders, that's about 1.3 miles of shoulders. And that's also being accomplished in partnership with the city and county of Broomfield. And we are finishing the design. We anticipate construction for FY 2025. East County Line Road, that one is being designed, and that's reconstruction of 2 miles of jointly owned road between us and Weld County. And to help promote safety, and construction for that is programmed in FY 2026. And then,
Can I ask a question? Just so I'm understanding, because you all are the experts in transportation, this is not my wheelhouse. This is one thing I did not study. Widening, when I hear widening, I'm hearing just widening, making more room for cars. But help me understand shoulders. Shoulders as in bike, or bike commuters that is connected to something else that would help a bike. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Or broken down vehicles or.
For like safety.
Yes,
to-
it's for
to-
safety, it's for safety.
But not like.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And
that's
that's,
in our purpose.
But it's not the same as a bike. You would say bike lane if it was bike, it's just widening if it's like a shoulder, because it's not just a bike lane.
okay.
It's like a
that's
safety
very
tractors,
important.
like it's agricultural equipment. A lot of bikers will not use a shoulder. It's not for the everyday, it's like for the spandex wearing crew.
Okay, right, which is different.
Yeah,
Well, we haven't talked about who are we really trying to help here with these significant, expensive infrastructure projects. So, okay, thank you.
One thing I do want to say, like, sometimes at intersections, there will be widening of lanes, so at like 287 Isabel, we did add some lanes on. But that's turn lanes, yeah, turn lanes to help with the whole intersection itself and queuing and so forth. But that's about the only place that we do any through lane type turn lanes.
so these projects that you have listed here are not all transportation sales tax projects, or they are?
they are.
I'm just having a hard time understanding which projects these are on the list. So like 120th Street shoulders, which project on the list is that?
To clarify, yeah, so some of these projects are from the current sales tax. And then this list is for the sales tax extension, which technically begins in mid-24.
Okay.
And continues forward from that. So this is wrapping up the current list of projects as well as being prepared for the next list.
And just to clarify, I don't think, well, so I guess I'll ask the question. Do you intend to complete all the projects in the previous tax?
Yeah. I'm trying to think because I think as part of the previous tax, there were some. I have to look, but I'm pretty sure there are some multi-use trails that will not get constructed from that original.
In the next year.
Yeah. And I think that we probably have run out of some of the monies and needed for some of the roadway projects that we want to do. I can't tell you specifically, I can find that information, I can tell you specifically which ones necessarily am. One thing I did want to add was 120th Street shoulders, that's actually been ready to go for a while.
Yeah.
But we've been waiting for Lafayette to finish up their intersection, 120th and South Boulder. So, and they have had a lot of utility, or my understanding, a lot of utility construction issues. So we're, to lessen the impact on the public and the residents, we're just waiting for them to finish that out.
I guess it sometimes seems like when things get presented, they get presented as very like it's this way and it has to be this way, but it seems like there's a lot of decisions that are actually to be made of like which of those projects do we not finish and decide to start this new list of projects and how does that get prioritized and where's the conversation?
Let's see, left off with East County Line Road, and then the last one right there under the maintenance category is Boulder Canyon path repairs, and bids will be received for that this Thursday. Stacy, next slide.
Great, thanks. So in addition, for the regional projects or regional corridor projects, again, we talk a lot about these, you're familiar with them, but just highlighting it again, our Colorado 119 multimodal corridor improvements between Longmont and Boulder, and then also the ongoing work for Colorado 7 corridor and Colorado US 287. But one of the new projects that'll be coming forward is developing a South Boulder Road corridor plan, and that was one of the projects identified in RTD's Northwest Area Mobility Study that hasn't had any corridor planning yet. So it's getting queued up for on deck to move forward. So that's exciting as far as one of the new projects that we'll be working on between 2023 and 2025. Let's go to the next slide, Stacy.
Really quick on that, Kathleen. Who are the partners on that one?
For
The
South Boulder Road, it's all the communities along South Boulder Road, RTD, Dr. Cog. So it's basically all of the agency partners we normally work with the exception of CDOT, because South Boulder Road is not a state highway.
And when was the last time a study like that was done on South Boulder?
So there
With any
really
of the
hasn't been
partners.
one. The Northwest Air Mobility Study was completed in 2014, and there has not been any in-depth work for the full length of South Boulder Road since that time. Dr. Cog has started an initial corridor. I should be talking this way. I'm not sure. The camera up. So Dr. Cog has started a preliminary corridor plan for South Boulder Road this year, and then this work will take that to the next level. It'll feedback on the work that Dr. Cog is starting. So this is really the first time holistically we'll be looking at South Boulder Road throughout Boulder County. Okay.
You know, with that, I'll just interject, South Boulder Road came up in a land use case that how much we were not able to make a decision. But
We need to get.
one, I think I can say this in this meeting, it doesn't bear on approval or not approval of that land use hearing, but you know, we both really noted how wide it is and how straight it is and how that really encourages speeding. Yeah, and I mean, the public never would want to hear us say, oh, we're gonna take a lane out and make it more narrow and have more traffic congestion. But is that, do you know, are they looking at like, you know, traffic calming, speed reduction? What sorts of things are being looked at?
Sure. So
Yeah.
so Natalie just texted to ask to speak towards this way, so I'm sorry about looking in your direction, but on the South Boulder Road project, just like our other regional corridor projects, we'll be looking at all of the safety considerations, whether it's speeding, other crash types in addition to that, and then what are the particular design treatments that could be done. It could be maybe it's the same number of lanes, but they're narrower. It could be other types of speed enforcement. It could be the photo enforcement. It could be other types of intersection treatments to address the crash types that are happening on the corridor. So these corridor plans look at the aspects for people using all modes of transportation and including the safety components as part of that, as well as the bikeway. So if it's an extra wide facility, for example, there might be an opportunity, you have the same number of lanes, but you narrow the lanes and it creates more space to do bikeway improvements, or transit stops, things like that. So how do we maximize the use of the space for people using all modes and try to do things through design that can help reduce speeding and help improve safety in a variety of ways.
I wanted to add, so just to tap onto like the narrowing of lanes, there are actually, I'm trying to channel Mike Thomas right now. So South Boulder Road, I believe, are only our arterial within the county. And with each type of road that we have, there are certain requirements or needs that comes to the lane widths themselves, speed limit and so forth. And sometimes that is dictated more by statute and the type of road as to how narrow we can actually go. So narrowing lanes can be looked at, but I don't want to guarantee that that is something that we can even do to some extent.
Is that something we look at though during updates of multimodal standards as well, as if there was a reason that we want
Categorize that road differently.
to describe or have those standards differently? I think we'll have that opportunity this year too.
Yeah.
For going into next year's, we'll get that.
Well, and this was just a question, for sure, at the beginning of looking at it, so.
Yeah. So we can look at all of those things, and again, yeah, what are those opportunities, trade-offs, what constraints?
Deciding that through those was studied and just reconfigured to really address a lot of those things. So it's just that, again, we necked down the intersections and made the lanes narrower, did all the things.
Maybe just got people crossing the new crossing lights instead of down still where the mobile home park is. Like, what's up there, people?
The new signal makes a big difference. People do have to use it.
They have to use it. In the morning, the kids are just going across those.
Yep, all of the safety things we work on, there's the engineering component, the education, enforcement, the encouragement, all of those things, like how do we get it to work together? You're right, you can install something, then how do we encourage people to use it in a way that's going to be safe?
That's
Right.
because they cross
exactly.
right across to the smallest things. Sorry.
But that's a great example, because where you put the transit stop, whether it's for the school bus or TD service or whatever, it's going to generate where your pedestrians are trying to cross. So how do we plan for all of those different maneuvers safely? I just wanted to cover this real quickly in terms of the upcoming and ongoing projects for regional trails and bikeways. And I know we do have another check-in with you all next month to do a deeper dive on regional trails and bikeways. So I'll hit this at a high level, but we can certainly talk more about it today or at our next meeting. But similar to the road safety and resilience projects, we have some that are teed up for construction, including the Lobo Trail and the 4 Mile Creek Underpass, as well as some emergency repairs in the Boulder Canyon Trail. And then the work, again, we're doing in partnership with the Town of Lyons on St. Vrain and helping them get their project moving forward to construction. Some of the big projects that we have in the planning stage and the design include our Boulder to Erie Regional Trail Master Plan. It's called BERT, which I think is a great name. And that process has been ongoing, and we've had different aspects added into the project scope over the last couple of years and really enhancing the range of options and choices for particular alignments for those connections along the corridors. We're working on that and plan to have that master plan wrapped up in 2024. And then that project can move forward, identifying funding for implementation. Similarly, our North Foothills Highway along US 36 between Boulder and Lyons, that bikeway feasibility study is up and running, and we're looking at a variety of ways to make that work. And then the timeframe on that is also to have that complete in 2024. And then from that, we'll have cost estimates so we can move forward to look for funding for implementation. So these are just some examples. Again, there's a lot in the works, but wanted to highlight a few for today. And we can certainly, again, do a deeper dive on these next time. But again, a lot of the work that's happening in the planning stage, both with BERT and North Foothills, is centered around the community engagement and really pulling in the area stakeholders and I would call the customers of the corridors and how and what are they looking for and how do we create regional bikeways that are going to be usable and desirable by the public. So those are really exciting. We're actively working on those. Stacy, let's go to the next slide.
Just on the BERT, I've heard from a lot of community members, different routes, different concerns, different community groups having significantly different feedback on the route. And so I think it's really important just to make sure we have a diverse group of stakeholders who are reaching out to people we don't normally hear from, so that we don't design the trail in the wrong place or have to build 2 trails or 4 trails if we don't collect community input. So I just think there are a lot of different stakeholders and that I'm already hearing a lot of different, like, it's this route, right? So, and they don't all agree.
Right.
So that's a really important one. And I just think, you know, on the Boulder to Lions Bikeway, it's a project that I believe has been looked at many times, and I'd be very much in favor of doing a design build contract. I don't favor splitting the design from the build, and there are a few different CDOT processes that I would favor going down to reduce the amount of time it takes to complete that project. I think it's a really important safety.
Yep, we agree. We want to get that project done as quickly as possible as well. And you're right, there's a lot of different delivery methods that can be done for a project, but generally they all require having the construction money secured. And right now we just have the funding secured for the feasibility study. So once we get that done, we'll know what our cost estimates are, and then we can pursue the funding.
I know 3 people who can change the budget, so luckily you're in the right room.
Well, and we do have some of the preliminary information again that we can share with you at the upcoming meeting on the cost estimates there. And the information I was heard recently, there's 50% of that corridor is pretty straightforward in terms of the buildability within the right of way. It's the other 50% that's the challenge when you look at the grades and the drop-offs and the topography along 36 between here and Lions, where it gets complex and expensive. The other, I think, important project that we're coordinating with on that project outside of between CP&P and Public Works is also coordinating with Parks and Open Space, and they're working on a wildlife crossing analysis in that area because some of the safety issues that are happening there are from crashes with wildlife. And so they're looking at that along with CDOT in terms of, again, so might be some opportunities to partner together on ways to improve the biking facilities as well as to pair with some other projects. So that's one of the things we also do is look at how are the other projects happening in the area and how can we partner and coordinate that. So sorry, Stacy, we didn't go on to the next one. You go back and forth. And so these are just a highlight of some of our transit services and programs that we use the Boulder County transportation sales tax to support. Some of these are ongoing services in throughout Boulder County, and then I just highlighted some of the new ones, including the one at the top is called Southeast Superflex. And currently Boulder County provides Ride Free Lafayette, which is an on-demand service within the Lafayette community. But we were able to get DRCOG, Denver Regional Council of Governments funding to create a new type of on-demand service that would serve all of Southeast Boulder County. So it would connect together from Louisville and Lafayette and Superior and that whole area, so that again gives people more options and choices on how to connect between communities. And we're finding that a lot of the customers that are using the flex type services are vulnerable populations and are trying to reach different destinations that aren't all within their existing community. So we're excited about that project that'll be coming up. And then also in 2024, we will be beginning the countywide strategic transit plan. And that is something we can go in depth and look across the county, look countywide at the transit needs, but also within communities and how are we supporting transit planning within the local communities, connecting across, and then looking at potential opportunities for interregional transit. And when we talk about transit, we're thinking of all types of transit. So from micro transit, micro mobility, to more traditional transit, to other types of transit. So what does that whole potential mix of transit opportunities look like? And then how do we work together again with all of the agency partners to deliver that over time in a way that's complementary with the services that RTD are providing. And so we're excited about that coming up. And then one of the other projects that we're working on in the mountain communities, Angel Bond is leading, are the mountain rides communities, and how are we better connecting people who live in mountain communities with the services that they need and access to opportunities. So a lot happening in the transit space.
On this Superflex, does that replace Ride Free Lafayette? And do you anticipate that that will cause the call-in ride in Superior and Louisville to be terminated?
No, this will sit on top of that. So the local on-demand services will continue to run within their communities, but for people who need to reach destinations that are, let's say they live in Lafayette and they need to go somewhere in Louisville, they'd be able to use the Superflex. So it sits on top of the other existing services. So it's building capacity for people to take transit in different types of trips to different types of destinations.
And Kathleen, thanks, but I had a curiosity about Superflex as well. So I heard it's an addition to, when are you thinking, I can see 2025 up there, but where if the infrastructure is already there, there's already route in place, and so you've got the funding, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So each of the projects that are funded through the Dr. Cog transportation improvement funding have a time frame associated with them. So for example, the transit strategic plan, the funding is identified for 2024. Some of the other transit services are 2025, and then the one on Colorado 7, 26 and 27. So some of these, yes, we could start them anytime, but the funding is tied to a specific year based on the overall Dr. Cog funding program across the region. So when you get your funding, you don't always get the year you requested it. They kind of have to make sure that the resources work at a region-wide scale. So, but one of the things we do is try to make sure that through our transit service planning, we're ready to go. So if that funding is available in 25, we'll do the service planning in 24, so that as we get those agreements in place, we can get going with the service as quickly as possible.
Okay, and so just so I'm understanding, the infrastructure is already in place, or it's literally like you could get funding from the very beginning and we'll do a study and then we'll see how we might get it together and then maybe leverage more funding. Just because I haven't heard of this Southeast Superflex.
So the Southeast Superflex funding is specifically for operations. Right. And so as soon as we have that funding, we can start operating the service, but we can do pre-planning around service level and frequency. We can start doing the process to get our intergovernmental agreements in place with CDOT and Dr. Cog and those sorts of things, so that when the funding is available for operations, we can begin right away. We can do as much pre-planning work as possible, so that depending on the time frame for some of these, we can hit the ground running as soon as the money is available.
And I'll be interested in this section of services and programs. We've lost ridership due to COVID just over the last 3 years. We also are in an area of the country and also an area of the state that really hasn't historically put transportation in different areas. We build up a system that requires personnel to work. So these are all great, but I'm very interested in how do we also connect getting this information out to folks who you talk about vulnerable populations. We've created vulnerable sections of our community and we've created the system that creates the vulnerabilities for people and residents. And so I'll be really interested. How do we actually get to the folks who need this the most, who are in the poverty? We heard in a different presentation earlier this time that the low figure is 11% of our residents are in poverty. And we don't have enough wages. They're all connected. And we continue to build housing areas. So that's what I'm very interested in, how we connect that to this work when we're asking for funding, when we're getting grants, when we're getting people to design, et cetera. So
Okay, and that's actually a perfect segue to our next slide.
Thanks, I have something on that last slide, if you could go back.
Oh, can we go back again, Stacy?
Yeah, there we are. And presumably, or I should say presumably, I'm hoping that the countywide strategic transit plan may tell us that some of these we shouldn't keep operating. Maybe, I don't know if they will, but My question is, I see up there, Lions we've been able to bring the Lions flyer back, getting taxi vouchers for Lions, to go to Lions to Boulder, Lions to Ron. How does a community, get to have those services? Why Lions and not Superior? Why Lions and not Jamestown? Some other.
Sure. So it's a great question. So our Lions, a lot of these, well, let's say all of these routes that have been identified and that we're currently running, including the Lions flyer and the taxi vouchers, those actually came out of the impacts of the pandemic with when RPD quit running the Y route between Boulder and Lions. And so we went to the Lions community, we spent time with community members, staff, and talked about what would be a more, we just couldn't leave the community cut off from service, because in that particular case, there was no other option. And so we said, well, let's start the fixed route service, which is the Lions flyer in a peak period format, and then supplement that with the taxi vouchers for the off-peak travel time. Because there aren't, so in terms of how that comes about, it comes about through community, through outreach and engagement, working with RTD when they knew they would have to cut the route and there wouldn't be anything there. This would be a way to backfill that. And then what would that level of service need to look like? How would that level of service fit the market? So rather than just bringing back the Lions flyer exactly like the Y, we said, we worked with the community and said, what are the peak times you need? When do they need to be in Boulder? When do people in Boulder need to be in Lions? How do we set up those trip patterns to work with the community? So it really comes out of the community engagement process. And we're continuing to hear a lot of interest in writing the Lions flyer. For the fare-free months this summer, we were able to get some additional funding to run midday trips, because the current Lions flyer is more designed for commuting from Lions to Boulder in the morning and then back again in the evening. But there's a lot of demand for midday trips. So I think testing out the opportunity for midday trips will be helpful too, so we can understand what that future demand might be.
Yeah, and Kathleen, I'll just share in case you didn't see, Mayor Rogan of the Lions forwarded to us, and I don't know who else was on there, but they had a resident who was a kiddo that went to their council meeting and was so thankful about bringing back that Lions flyer. So just to share with your team.
Thank you.
It's very cool.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. We've heard so many heartwarming stories about the Lions flyer because it is a lifeline for the community, and the passengers get to know their drivers. And the story I loved was one of the drivers got to know one of the employees, and he would bring his son on the bus with him to daycare in Boulder. And the driver learned that it was the man's son's birthday, and she baked him a birthday cake and brought it on the bus. And it's like, those are the stories that to me hit home what the why behind what we do, because it's connecting people in that personal way. And the bus driver, she's wonderful. She's always like, I'm always going to drive for the Lions flyer. I just that's the route she always chooses. So it's fun to get to connect. It's not just at a system level, but it's at a human scale.
I take the bus to work and that's not what happens on my.
It's not like that.
Every route's different.
That's true.
So in the interest of time, I would, if it's okay, if I could switch to the next slide.
Yeah, and I have to go. I thought I shared it there that I did. But I did read your packets. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much. And if you have other questions, let us know.
Yeah, I will.
Can you dismiss that?
Right on, interesting. Okay. I'm like, all this stuff is like popping up. I'm like, well, okay, anyway. So the reason I mentioned earlier that it was a good segue to the next slide, Commissioner Locham, and some of the questions you were asking about, well, how do we connect people to the services? And that's really the work that Angel Bond and her team through the Mobility for All programs manages. And it's really helping people on a one-on-one level, in many cases, find access to the services and learn how, not only when does the bus run, or how do I use the app, or how do I call for a trip, help people at a customer level get over any potential barriers to accessing the system. Because it is intimidating. If you're not familiar with riding if you're not familiar with, for example, car share, or some of the bike programs that we offer, it can be intimidating, and people might say, well, I don't know how to do it, I can't afford it. So we have a lot of programs that we offer through Mobility for All, and that are now going to be, for the first time, able to be funded through our transportation sales tax. That's really what's one of the things that's new about the sales tax extension, is that it identified funding for transportation mobility programs. So here's again just some examples, but it's really that one-on-one experience. Angel and her team have taken this picture here on the right, is they've taken a group on the interregional Flex Express from Boulder and Longmont up to Fort Collins, and then learned the system up there, and then came back on the bus. So it's giving people that firsthand experience on how to use the system and how to overcome the barriers and how to make the system more affordable. So one of the things that you'll see highlighted is the EcoPass program. We've been working to make sure that everyone who lives in Boulder County affordable neighborhoods have access to EcoPass. And so we actually go to the neighborhood and print the EcoPass and have the educational programs on site. So they don't have to figure out how to travel to an RTD site in order to get their EcoPass. We bring the EcoPass to them. So we're trying to make sure that people have those complementary services and programs to be able to use the system and navigate.
Just a quick time check.
Oh,
We got
sorry.
8 minutes left.
Oh,
so-
all right. I think that,
Well, and I just wanted, I've been participating with Angel, and she does a fabulous job for and her entire team in the mobility and access. Those initial, before the 1C. So I'm aware of that, and I also just, to me, it's kind of a reminder when we look at all of the first slides, and the significant projects and the multi-million dollars that we're spending under the umbrella of transportation. And so this is just, for me, it feels like a really good example that now we're at the end of this talking about some grant money and like, we've got, I would love us to flip that and put people at the front of the transportation, even our own presentations and our conversations. What would that look like if we even slightly turn the percent of funding that we get and that we use to the beginning? So like if we created a secure plan of how Angel and her team can educate and be out in the, like whether it's with our UCHA properties and those tenants, whether it's in certain communities, the census tract based, whatever it is. Again, if we look through policy 1.6, if we look at the determinants of how race impacts our own residents of Boulder County, when we talk about transportation, we could change the game. We could change the game of people access transportation, how we reduce that piece of day-to-day and time resource, the amount of time that people have to be in those spaces, how to support. So and I appreciate all the work. So that wasn't the question. What are opportunities to maybe shift the way that we've been doing?
I was also going to say a similar thing about Angel and her team, just like at the Cinco de Mayo this year, that outreach was like one of the best engagement efforts. And just you see that at different community events and how effective that is, the lasting impression it makes on people. And so for me, like shrinking the amount that we do in like planning and like shifting it over to Angel, that's
Well, I agree, and I think that was one of my first opening experiences with the transportation team was Jeff Butts and his drive to make sure there was some bilingual outreach and education and regards to the programming. So I see it happening, and so for me, it's more. Now I've lost one of the board members. How do we financially, because that's how it's going to happen. It's the funding. How do we make sure that that is more of a priority in my mind?
great, well, thank you. I appreciate that, because this is, again, foundational. It's everything we do is centered on the person and how do we help them use the system. And it's good feedback for us in terms of how we even present the information. And again, one of the highlights that helped inform some of this work was the Boulder County very first coordinated human services plan that the commissioners approved last year. And really, how is that helping to inform then these priority areas? But we can certainly do more to emphasize this. I think we're at the end. Stacey, if you want to go to the last slide, these are just some resources, again, available information online. There's an interactive map there's a lot more information in depth on the project list. A lot of information around all of the different things we talked about today. We can, am glad to talk more. This is just kind of the high level overview. And Stacy, I think that's the last one, isn't it? Yep. So if there are any questions or discussions? Yeah, Stacy has lost her voice, so she.
I know how.
Yeah.
I don't have additional questions. I appreciate you sending questions into them. So for me that, well, there is one question. I didn't hear an answer to when will we have a conversation in regards to prioritizing transportation projects from this board. I think that might be on like a list that the board has to do, but I want to make sure that you all are part of that.
So coming out of a conversation we had a few weeks ago, I know staff are working on it. I think we'll bring that back to you at an administrative meeting in the near future. I'm not sure how quickly that's coming. They're also for your next quarterly update on regional transportation is specific to the trails planning. So that conversation will be the same group of folks.
Follow-up data that I don't need a meeting on, but would be great to see is just how the ridership did in this fare-free period. It seemed, just as it's just from my personal experience and not data, so that's why I like the data, so I can have a better sense of what it was. But it seems like last year, there was a much bigger shift and more people coming on for the zero fare month. I haven't noticed that in my route anyway, but I'd love to see the data to understand what really happened and not just my perception of it. And then we focused today on the 2023 transportation sales tax update, and I really appreciate that. But there are a lot of different pools of funds for transportation projects in Boulder County. And so just when we do talk about prioritizing, having a better picture of the full picture. You know, like even with the rock slide on Highway 7, like I called Heather and her team to be like, thank you. You guys are doing a great job at just really understanding the universe that we're talking about when we're talking about transportation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Angel. And thanks for others who might be listening.
Thank you for joining.